Nothing epitomizes market failures more than the cost of insulin.
In July, California Governor Gavin Newsom announced a first-in-the-nation plan for the Golden State to make its own insulin.
California is now taking matters into our own hands.
The state is getting into the insulin business because of high prices. In 2020, the average out-of-pocket spending by Medicare Part D enrollees was $54 per insulin prescription. That comes to an average annual cost of $572. These high prices have made the U.S. a global outlier. Today, Americans pay about 8 times more for their insulin than the rest of the developed world.
Insulin has really been one of the poster child examples of drug prices run amok.
All of the entities in these supply chains are for-profit companies, and so they are looking out for their shareholders. None of them has a fiduciary responsibility to patients.
So, why is insulin so expensive in the U.S.? And could California's plan to curb insulin costs actually work? Discovered just over 100 years ago, in 1921, insulin is a life-saving drug essential for the survival of about 7.4 million diabetic Americans, or roughly 2% of the U.S. population.
Before insulin, diabetes, especially type 1 diabetes, was often fatal, and lifespans were much shorter.
Part of the reason insulin is so expensive is due to the nature of the insulin market, which is controlled by 3 insulin manufacturers. Together, these companies produce almost 100% of the insulin supply in the US. A representative from Novo Nordisk wrote in an email, "We know that not one single solution will work for everyone and continue to develop programs to ensure people with diabetes can get the insulin medication they need." In a separate statement, a representative from Eli Lilly wrote in an email, "Lilly is deeply committed to insulin affordability and has long advocated for holistic, sustainable policy solutions, such as passing through rebates directly to people who use insulin and limiting out-of-pocket costs that can significantly help people who use insulin."
Insulin is complex to manufacture, and the regulatory pathway for low-cost versions of biologic drugs in the U.S. is less well established, and so you don't see a lot of strong competition.
A 2021 Senate investigation also identified middlemen called pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs, for contributing to the increases. The insulin supply chain involves numerous players in a complicated web of relationships. Within this system, PBMs are the third-party intermediaries that negotiate prices between drug manufacturers, insurance companies, and pharmacies.
List price for a drug is the sticker price that is set by the manufacturer, sort of like an automobile would have a manufacturer's suggested retail price. But like automotives, the list price isn't what most people end up paying for that.
Professor Karen Van Nuys is an assistant professor at USC who recently published a study about insulin affordability.
After the list price is set, manufacturers pay a whole bunch of discounts and rebates and coupons and fees back to people in the distribution system. And then what the manufacturer ends up taking from that is the list price minus all of those discounts and rebates and fees, and that's known as the net price.
In 2019, the average net price for diabetes medications produced by the drug maker Sanofi was $62, but the average list price was $361. A spokesperson from Sanofi wrote in an email, "Despite rhetoric about insulin prices, the net price of insulin has fallen for 7 consecutive years. PBMs have demanded rebates for pharmaceutical products for nearly 2 decades, and they are an ingrained feature of our healthcare system." In recent years, America's high drug prices have spurred startups seeking to deliver lower-cost alternatives. Earlier this year, entrepreneur Mark Cuban launched the Mark Cuban Cost Plus Drug Company, an online store that sells hundreds of low-cost generic medications. Cuban's model undercuts the traditional drug supply chain by selling directly to consumers and cutting out PBMs. Another company that could serve as a model for California is Civica RX, a nonprofit established by a group of hospitals and philanthropic groups. Similar to Cuban's startup, Civica undercuts the established system by cutting out PBMs, but it also plans to lower costs by bypassing the major drug makers.
We've had early conversations from the very beginning with the state of California. As you know, they're going through their selection process to find a partner to do this. And, we wish the state of California well, and frankly, would be delighted to partner with them should it come to that.
Dan Lillienquist is the chief architect behind Civica.
We only enter the markets where we feel like there's distortion in the market, where the markets are functioning well and prices are stable and patients have accessible drugs. We'll never enter those markets. But when we see a failure in an abuse, this is a market regulating function in the sense that we will intervene in those markets, bring competition to help force market mechanisms to correct the problem.
Civica seeks to disrupt the traditional drug supply chain with a model known as a healthcare utility. The concept is built on a membership structure in which different hospital systems partner together to purchase generic drugs from either their own in-house manufacturer or a subcontractor. Since launching in September of 2018, Civica is now producing 64 generic drugs. In March, the nonprofit announced it will begin manufacturing and distributing low-cost insulin to its patients by early 2024.
We're building a 140,000 square foot manufacturing facility in Petersburg, Virginia, which will be online later this year. And in that facility, we'll be able to make 100% of the vial capacity for insulin for the country.
Civica says it plans to produce 3 generic insulins in vials and pre-filled pens. Pricing to consumers will be no more than $30 per vial and $55 per 5 pen cartridges.
If Civica or other players introduce low-cost insulin, it would affect how the established players operate. I think they would have to accept lower profit margins than what they've been used to so far.
To reduce its insulin costs, California is attempting to circumvent the established market. California will spend $100 million in this year's budget, $50 million to develop low-cost insulin. The other half would be used to set up an in-state insulin manufacturing facility.
Because the state is involved and because the state does not plan to make a profit from this, they want to make this available at a very low cost.
Newsom's administration has not announced all of the details of its plan, including when its insulin will be available and how much it will cost. But a tweet from the governor's office noted that many Americans pay between $300 and $500 a month for the drug, and that with California's insulin, that cost would, at a minimum, be cut in half. California's initiative comes as Washington moves forward with its own insulin cost-cutting measure.
And now I'm going to take action that I've been looking forward to doing for 18 months.
On August 16th, President Biden signed into law legislation to lower prescription drug prices. The law's most immediate effects will start next year, when people on Medicare will see their insulin costs capped at $35 a month.
Now, law.